Welcome, everybody. It is your host, Ángel Rafael. You are listening to episode number 2 of Pretentious, the podcast all about showing you artists you've never heard of yet. I am sitting here with Dana Kinsey, Poet Laureate, second Poet Laureate ever of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, educator, mentor, Shakespearean actress, mother, traveler, all around dope person. Dana, hi and welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm
glad you're here. I been listening to the Game of Thrones audiobooks. And I don't know if you ever listened to or watched the show or anything, but they're always really grandiose about their introductions.
Yes.
And I wanted to make sure that I got at least most of the bullet points.
I think you nailed it. You nailed it.
Good. So, what brings you here to Pretentious? Why are you an artist that people should care about?
Well, I feel like I've lived a lot of lives, and I also feel like my art takes many different forms, and I feel like my art's still evolving. I feel like I'm on the cusp of even something newer now, that I'm Poet Laureate, because I have this dream of bringing all different types of artists together to collaborate and make new and different art, sort of change the face of Lancaster a little bit.
So you want to, that's a lofty goal. You want to change the landscape of Lancaster art. So how do you plan on doing that?
Well, my first step is to sort of bring together visual artists and writers, poets, into a space, Lancaster Art Vault, a perfect space, right? And I'm bringing the writers in to get a tour of the vault, and then to sort of look at the art in terms of what speaks to them. And their mission as writers is going to be to either speak to the artist or speak to someone in the painting or speak as the painting. There's any number of ways to approach it, but it's called ekphrastic art. And we'll be taking 2 hours to sort of get started, and then after they leave and they've written in the space, they've sort of lived with these pieces that they've chosen, photograph them, they'll go off on their own for about 2 weeks, and then they're going to come back and we'll invite the fine artists, and they'll get to perform their finished poems in an open mic so that the artists can hear their response to the work. And then I want one-on-one conversations where the visual artist speaks to the writer to see how close they were, or if it sort of altered or changed their vision, if it spoke back to them in any sort of way. But to open these conversations, I feel like all the artists are in their own separate boxes, and I'd really like to integrate and put them together a little bit to have opportunities, because I think when you have multi-genre art coming together, almost like a mixed media situation, I think it enhances everyone's work. And plus, to make friends, those people think differently and work differently, and I learn from visual artists the patience and the time it takes to layer colors and different approaches, and I think it's something that can translate to other art forms. Eventually, I'd like to do the same thing with music, bring the musicians in and just keep adding, until there's all of this multi-genre work happening.
That's super dope. When I was in college, the college I went to had dance, had music, had multimedia, had visual painting, photography, had all of those things. And it was, my year was the year that they started really pushing into the interdisciplinary aspect of being an artist, and then also the sort of like getting everybody together, like, yo, y'all are musicians, go meet some ballet dancers, go meet some modern dancers. And it hasn't been, honestly, I haven't really seen much of that, like intentional mixing of genres and things like that. Since I was in college, it's very difficult to find people that see the value in that.
It is.
What inspired you to want to work with other forms of art?
I took a class some years ago on ekphrasis and just.
Can you repeat that again? On what?
It's ekphrastic art. It's ekphrastic. It means that you're responding in one art form to a different art form.
Okay.
And it can go either way. So musicians can read a poem and respond in that way too, and it's all considered ekphrastic work. It's from the Greek. It has Greek roots, but it's just art art responding to art. Yeah, so I really loved that, and I felt that it added so much, and it caused me to write about things I may never have considered writing about, and to consider, like, all right, so colors. What personality does orange have? When I see a painting with really vibrant colors, what kind of words match that? And it stretches me, it stretches my imagination, and I feel like it could do the same. Again, to the discipline, right? The rehearsing. I think sometimes writers want to write something and just be finished. Whereas I feel as if musicians and visual artists, they spent a lot of time perfecting and rehearsing and really taking all the time to perfect something. And I know that for me, I want to be intentional about the time I spend on editing and revising and reconsidering and maybe take a whole poem apart and cut out the lines and put it back together. I think we can learn a lot from each other if we're open to that. And it excites me. I love going to hear a writer when it's combined with music. You and I work together, and I think that your music took my poem to places it might not have gone dramatically. And I think that your piece sort of organically came from my poem, and I love the way it all sort of fueled each other. Our work fueled each other's, and I want more of that. I really enjoy that.
Yes, it's the way that art lives after it's done is much different from a musician and a performer standpoint compared to like somebody who prints it. Like you get a book, it's the 4th edition, it's for the most book, it's done.
True.
But as a musician, as a performer, it gets to live and move on, and like each time you perform it, it's a different thing. And I'm glad you get to experience that as a writer, because it's not, it's different to experience that compared to just like, all right, like even more so like if you have a typewriter, you know what I mean? Typewriter, that's done, it's out. There's nothing you can do. A sculptor, you have it, it's sculpted, it's out. That's true. But in a way, it's kind of cool though, because then you give yourself a deadline, and then you're like, yeah, that's it. As a musician, I can have 100 variations of a song, and it'll never be done. Sure,
that's interesting. Yeah, and two, the difference between page poetry and spoken word poetry has always fascinated me too, and I love the idea of spoken word artists learning from page poets and vice versa. So I think that's another area. Our city has some really fine poets who consider themselves either spoken word or page poets, not necessarily both. But I think there's opportunity for either to go both ways. I'd love to see some of my spoken word friends get things on paper and think about form and structure and how it looks on the page and how you use white space to make sure that somebody's reading it the way they want it to be read. And I also think page poets discount themselves as performers, like, oh, well, I'm just gonna read this, I'm not going to perform it. So they say poetry readings, whereas spoken word is about performance. And I think so many page poets have work that lends itself. It has all of the components, and I think with some rehearsal, some practice, they could enhance what they do. And I think sometimes more people are willing to hear poetry rather than read it. I think that both are equally important, but I do think because spoken word has such a presence in this city, because it's been really brought forward by people like Sir Dominic Jordan and Evita Colon and all of the poets who are really out there doing their thing. Lancaster has opportunity for that, but I'd like to see more page poets rise to the occasion and see what they can do with their work and share, maybe even read each other's, see how that feels. I had one party where I invited some of each. I had some traditional page poets and some spoken word artists, and we all threw poems onto the center of the table without names, and everybody pulled somebody else's and had to read it. And it was fascinating, and everyone had fun. And it was so interesting to hear a spoken word artist's poem read by a page poet and vice versa. And I think I could see the smile on someone's face when it was their poem and they were hearing it a different way. You know? So to give opportunities for that as well, and everybody sort of be on the same team, make Lancaster the place where, you know, all writers come together. It doesn't even necessarily have to be just poets. It's Poet Laureate, but I like to think of it as sort of a guiding place for all things creative.
That's really interesting. So the other poets were inferring their own rhythmic sort of thing to what they got. Yeah, they were, and they really didn't even have time to rehearse it. It was cold reading. And so imagine what it would be had they had time to rehearse out loud on their own, you know, really make it into something. I just think, you know, and you hear things differently when you hear your words in someone else's voice, with someone else's inflections, the way they're understanding the words on the page. It's eye-opening. You know, because you realize, like, oh, wow, maybe I needed an extra comma there, or maybe that line needed some white space so it would go slower. No, there's visual cues that can be used to make sure that, you know, there's integrity in the work. Interesting. So, have you ever given your piece or given your work to somebody else and have had like a not so good experience where they read your poetry in a way that it was like, I'm not really feeling that, or maybe instead of like a negative spin to it, or like had an experience where they read it and you felt like it was completely misinterpreted?
Yes, I would say both positive and negative experiences with that. I remember I wrote a poem, and it was about my mother. It was a pretty deep poem. My mother died 5 years ago, and it was sort of analyzing who she was, because as a kid I never really thought about that. And as an adult, I was always in my own world, in my own life, that I didn't stop to really think about why she did certain things, or what her dreams were, what she left behind in sacrificing for me. And the piece, I thought that the piece had hope in it, but when I heard this other writer deliver it, it sounded so grim and so dark, and they didn't pick up on what I thought was hope, but maybe it was more subtext than anything. And then I went back and re-examined it, and I did add some other things, some other components to sort of balance it out, because I didn't want it to be such a dark image of her. I wanted the hope to come through, and I wanted my thankfulness for the sacrifices she made to come through, and they weren't coming through, and I didn't know that until I heard someone else read it. So that matters. Also, what changes immensely is when I hear a male voice read my poem.
What? Explain.
Yeah, because I think there's a certain energy to a poem, and I feel like when you put it in a deeper, more resonant voice, you know, somebody coming from a different perspective, it also changes it. For me to hear it in a lower register, it colors it differently somehow, if that makes sense. And there's a different energy to it. I just think that there is, and I think it's not positive or negative. I think it's just different, and I really enjoy that. I like hearing different variations of, like you said with music, it's just, a different timbre, a different sound, a different feel, a heavier maybe take on it than I would have. Especially someone with a really distinctive voice, like a super low voice or a very resonant voice, So I think it's helpful as writers to hear our work in other voices. It's something that's important. I always did when I was in the classroom. I would exchange essays or exchange poetry and have people hear what it's like to just sit and hear your words,
Yes, it's never understood until I started sharing my work that, what I felt inside might not be what's on the page.
Yeah.
And and it's actually maybe the first time. I don't know if this was like this for you, and I'd like to hear about your first experience, but I know the first couple of times that I shared something, and what I wanted to share did not come across and gave a different feeling. I was quite offended and defensive about it.
Yeah.
It's just like, why don't you feel uplifted? Why don't you feel sad? Why don't you feel this? And they're like, I don't know. Your delivery just ain't right,
Yeah.
What were your first experiences with sharing sort of your work out?
It's a vulnerability. It really is. And I think it was Robert Frost who said, "No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader." So unless I'm truly moved when I write something, I can't expect that reaction. It's almost like you have to go through something. You have to experience, the trauma or the sadness or the defeat or whatever it is in your piece that you want to come through. If you're not really writing into that honestly, then no, it might not play out that way when you share it. And so the pieces that I was most vulnerable in writing, the pieces that took me a long time because I had to keep going back because it was hard, those are the pieces that seem to land. And I've learned that about myself. If I just skate over something or I write something to be, pretty or rhythmic or, the language is really fun or different or fresh, those aren't the pieces that are gonna move people. Those aren't the pieces that people are gonna snap to at the poetry reading because it's just surface level. I need to go deeper if I want that. And delivering something for the first time, you're gonna be a little hurt. But I always step back and say, I could have gone deeper with this. And maybe then it would resonate. And it always causes me to edit. It's always an editing situation after that. It's revision time. This didn't land. But then it always depends on the people too. Sometimes the vibe of a crowd is different. And if it's people who haven't been around poetry a lot or been around writers, they might be nervous to show their reaction. And then you just kind of get silence or you don't feel connected. And there's that hurts too. But you have to always consider like, okay, is this group of people the ones who are going to be honest, the ones who are going to make sounds? If they approve or disapprove or whatever, are they audibly giving me the feedback that I'm looking for, or are they just quiet out of respect?
Because they don't know how to respond.
Yeah,
or
and
how
because
to respond.
They've never been given permission. A lot of spoken word hosts give people permission. I went to a reading this summer, and the host did something really interesting. Instead of getting people to snap or clap, he made people take out their keys. And lots of people don't have keys, right? But the people who have these big, sets of keys, he asked them to jangle the keys when they wanted to let the poet know that was a powerful line or phrase or whatever. And that was a whole different vibe in and of itself, because I wasn't you weren't really getting the audible sounds, the mms and the ohs and the wows and the yes. You weren't getting that. You just heard all this jingle jangle of keys. So it was a different feel, but we got used to it. Yeah, so I think it's always up to the host to give people permission to react.
Yeah.
Spoken word artists generally love the reaction. Page poets, maybe not so much, but I think they would grow to love it in time. They're just not accustomed to it.
Yeah, they want everybody to be more attentive. Well, spoken word audiences are attentive, but they want people maybe not to respond up until the end, I guess, yeah?
Sometimes. It depends. Some artists really like to know that everyone's with them, and they like that audible sort of confirmation, and it changes them. Like, they go in deeper, or they get more dramatic, or they slow things down, and sometimes you get that run that back. some spoken word artists hate that because it throws them out of the moment and they have to think and go backwards. Other ones really appreciate it. It all depends.
You got to really know your work to be able to throw that back.
You do, especially if it's a new piece that you don't quite have. Yeah, and it changes the vibe. Or if someone's trying to record and all of a sudden they get a run that back, and it depends. I've had it happen maybe twice, and both times I was comfortable enough to run it back and not get lost, so I was okay.
It's so, when you think about like the juxtaposition between music and poetry, you talked about the more sort of vulnerable and the more truthful that you are as an artist, that the more people would resonate. And when you think about the juxtaposition, like, music is not always that way. It's like a lot of times when you hear sort of musicians, a lot of times what they're trying to do is they're trying to sound like a specific genre. They're trying to sound like a specific artist, which is, it's not bad, but it's just, the juxtaposition of like, them trying to sound like an artist compared to like, oh, you're not being fully 100% yourself, I'm not feeling your poetry. And I think that's dope. That's what I always liked about poetry is the honesty of it.
Yeah, for sure. And intentionality too. When you sit down to write, what is your goal? Do you want to startle someone with wordplay, or startle someone with honesty, or startle someone with something they've never heard before, or a revelation about yourself? I think just starting to write without that intentionality kind of leads us astray a little bit, and I find myself having to go backwards and like, what am I trying to get across? What is my central message? Do I want people to feel or think, or both, ideally, or just be entertained?
Now, when you're writing, are there exercises or moments that you just give yourself freedom to just not have intention and just do whatever comes to mind?
I do. I journal, and I just let that roll. That's, no lines, just I fill up a page and see what happens. And I might only like one phrase or one word or one idea, but just to write, just to set a timer and don't stop the pen. Just go. I always find those moments are fruitful, especially in response to something. If I hear something that makes me angry or makes me sad or makes me ecstatically happy, I just want my pen to go, and I'm not going to worry about editing or perfection or rhythm or anything. Just get it on a page. I think getting it on the page, making the pen move, is the first step.
That's for those of you who may be listening who've never done that. I want you to realize how difficult that is to not edit yourself before you write something down. That is one of the most complicated. I first did that when I was in therapy, and it took me, I don't even want to say it took me, it's still taking me time to just be like, don't worry if you spell something wrong. Don't worry if you are not grammatically correct. Just write. Just write your raw feelings down, and that's one of the it's a complicated beast to do that.
It really is. I think about like James Joyce, who writes Stream of Consciousness and just spills. It's kind of that. Not worried about spelling, not even worried if you're making any sense. You might repeat things, a word might keep coming back. I think finding the patterns in that, being open to that, letting it just take you is really, really beneficial and freeing. Yeah.
I think sometimes though, as well as there's at least for me, but I've witnessed this in other people, that there's a fear of really truly connecting with your subconscious. Do you feel that that's the case for yourself, or have you seen that in other people?
I do, and students too. Students, a lot of, especially honor students, kids who are super high achieving and have a lot of expectations on them. They're terrified to write something that's bad or write something that's honest. They just are convinced that writing is not that. Writing is how you profess knowledge, right? So if you're just writing words and sentences that don't make sense and invented spelling and no punctuation, that to them is a failure. So they're very careful, and I'll give 15 minutes and they might write one sentence. Or they just say, I can't think of anything. Wow. I can't think of anything. And then my advice is always, okay, whatever pops into your head, it doesn't even have to be sentences. Just do word association. Here's your word, go. And eventually they'll get used to it. But for me, I find that time of day matters a lot. If I sit down to write in the middle of the day, and I have other tasks like with my job or emails to answer or things to attend to in my home, like I'm not as focused. I find late at night when I just let my mind wander and it's dark and I don't have anything else that I need to do in that day, that I'm freer and I get better results.
Yeah, I think if I got mad stuff to do, and I try to sit down and journal, the journaling just becomes stressful.
Yeah. I'm sure it's like that with music too. Like, well, I'm going to take this hour and practice guitar or practice voice, and you're subconscious, right? It's that voice in your head. Like, you should be doing something else. You should be doing something practical, something, business related or cleaning or laundry or cooking or shopping. Yeah, it's hard to shut that down and just let it flow.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
What was your first sort of experience as an educator? What was your first experience as an educator that, or a experience, it doesn't have to be the first, but an experience that you've had as an educator that gave you a clear affirmation that it was something that you were meant to be?
That's a great question. The one that immediately popped into my head, and since we're going with just letting things flow, I'm going to go with this. This happened when I was teaching seniors, and I always start the year with their college essays, right? And I always teach something high interest on the side so that they get a little break from their college essays, but we're doing two things, right? So I decided I would teach Poe. It's fall, and Poe makes sense, and they like Poe. Yeah. And we were doing that and college essays, and there was a particular student in my class, and every time I would say to send up your next draft, I would see her actively take something she had on her desk and shove it into her binder, slam the binder, and put the binder on the floor every time. And we were on like maybe the fourth draft, and I hadn't seen one of hers, but I knew she had them. So I told her to stay after class, and I asked her who her next teacher was. I emailed the teacher and said, hey, she's not gonna be there. She's gonna be with me. I have something that we have to talk about. And I sat her down and I said, okay, like, what's going on here? Talk to me. And I said, I want to see your essay. And she said, it's not good. I'm like, it doesn't have to be good. It just needs to exist. I need to get numbers in a book. For right now, I just need to put a number in a book. And I need to know where your head is, where your heart is. Do you want to go to college? And she said, yes, I do. So I'm like, okay, you're going to have to trust me with this. And she handed me the essay. Now, college essays are 650 words. Mm-hmm. In this college essay that was framed around a cheerleading metaphor, she told me that she had lost her father to suicide, and that her father had shot her mother 3 times before he shot himself, all while she and her brother were locked outside the house.
Damn.
Right. So, first of all, I had no idea how I hadn't known this story, but I didn't grow up in Lancaster. Mm-hmm. The story was all over the news. Probably a lot of other teachers who were local to Lancaster would have known this information about her, but I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So I had to respond to just the information itself.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that, my God, this happened to you, and you're sitting here in one piece in my classroom, wanting to go to college. And the other truth of it was she had been in relatives' homes that didn't work out. She had been in a lot of foster homes where she had been damaged and abused and treated horribly. She had so much happening, and her expression just didn't exist. She was expressionless, as if she had either accepted all of it or it had devastated her, but she was finished with it. She wasn't going to react anymore. It wasn't going to be vulnerable in front of me. She just kind of folded her arms and waited for me to read it. So I knew that, before any conversations would happen, a hug had to happen, and we had to connect on a different level. And I had to say, look, this is a lot. First of all, your writing is powerful. Yeah. Second of all, your experience is powerful, and we have to think about how are we going to get this on a page to get it to do what you want it to do, which is get yourself into a college, to change your life, to keep moving forward. I'm going to acknowledge right away that this is a hard story, and I don't know that you can tell it in 650 words. And I especially don't know if you could tell it using a cheerleading metaphor. So the cheerleading metaphor was your prompt? That was hers. Oh, her prompt. Well, I taught using a metaphor, and she decided that because she was a cheerleader, she would approach it from that standpoint, which, she was trying something brave, and I told her that. Like, it's a really different, fresh take on this information, on your story, but I don't think it's working. I think we have to take it away because you only have these 650 words. Plus you have to show that you've survived this terrible, terrible trauma, and on the other end, you're ready to move into a new life. Yeah. That's what the college admissions people want to read. So the very hard lesson was, sometimes writing is not about you, it's about a purpose. But this writing served a lot of purposes, and we became close after that. And I realized that I was able to step back, even though I had never experienced anything like that, even remotely like that. I could connect with her, and it was because of writing. And I also realized that she was poetic. A lot of words she used, a lot of the choices she made, she had all the elements of spoken word poetry. So we took that piece, and it turned into a lot of variations. One that was an effective college essay, but also one that was a poem, and also one that pushed us into a project of writing a book together. Teacher, student, someone who had experienced terrible trauma, and I wrote into it, she wrote into it. We're still working on that project, because in the meantime, she did go to college, and she's a teacher now, and she has her first job, and she had a child, and she's getting married. Amazing. But, I've stayed with her through all of it, and I think that that's what a teacher is about. I think being a teacher is about making connections that sometimes are meant to last past a year when you teach the student, and I'm able to do that work. And I think that's probably my most important qualification beyond any knowledge of literature, grammar, writing. I think that making those connections and being able to make sure someone's okay.
That's an incredible connection to have with a student like that. I think you only get a few of those in your lifetime.
I've been lucky. I've had probably more than most, because somehow the universe put me in the right place at the right time, and there's a lot of students I'm still connected to and continue to connect and now work with as Poet Laureate. They're doing work in Lancaster, and somehow we're now collaborating.
So she's a poet now.
She's a writer, yeah, she definitely is. She was a Poet Laureate of her senior class, and she and another young woman wrote a piece together that they performed at graduation, and she's defined herself as a creative.
Wow.
And I love that. I love that for her. Yeah.
Very cool. So you got 2 Poet Laureates working on a book together.
This is correct.
Not cool.
Yeah, and I see her baby grow, and I watch her relationship and just the way she maneuvers through life, because I'm not just a teacher anymore, I'm a learner too, and I've learned from her. As bad as things seem, there's no way that anything remotely as bad as what she's suffered, and the way she's come out of it, so strong and so resilient and so open-hearted to the world. And now her students, she's wanted to give back. And, a whole class of 4th graders is lucky enough to be in her care.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, like how do you move on from that? Like how do you move on from that? And, just from me as a first-time listener listening to that, I think about all the goofy stuff that's happened in my life, some of it really, really traumatic and some of it just dumb. But like that's real, that's heavy. That's super heavy.
Yeah. It really is.
And to have enough hope in life to want to have a kid. You know what I mean? Like
imagine. Right?
That's mad strength.
And to be able to trust a man and trust a relationship and trust yourself with the care of an entire classroom of students and your own baby. So I've been blessed to be put in a position where I can observe and watch and learn and absorb these students into my world,
So what phases? So, oh dear, that scared the crap out of me. So in the phases of your life as an artist, what have been the different fuels, the different seeds that have fueled you through your different phases as an artist? Do you even consider yourself to have phases as an artist? I guess should be the first question.
Yeah, definitely. And I find myself kind of bouncing back and forth between theater and writing, because those are my 2 loves. And there are some times when I just want to be on a stage and I want to speak someone else's words.
Yeah.
Because there's power in that, right? And I want to exercise those muscles, my acting. I want to be able to emote and make people feel things by becoming a character that's not me. Sometimes I'm in a phase where I think playwrights' words are more important than mine. And not to say that mine aren't, but there are times when I just want to immerse in that. And that feels good and right to me. And then I'll go to rehearsals and I'll dive deep and research the character and, get into that, and I'll lose a little track of my writing. I won't write for a minute. But then as soon as I finish, I find myself wanting to write about the experience, and new things open. So I think taking little breaks from the different art that I do matters a lot. Also music too. Sometimes I get really into music and I'll just want to listen to a lot of different kinds of music, and not express myself. I just let it all soak in, kind of take it in, if you will, and add it to my creative data bank of things. But that makes me feel a certain kind of way, and then eventually I'm ready to write again or ready to audition again. And there's disappointments too that happen, right? I'll audition for a role that I really think I'm right for and ready for, and then I don't get it. So then you have to kind of go to, well, it wasn't about me. The director had another idea. The director didn't see me. The director saw this other actor. But you take it a little personally, right? Because they didn't select you. So I also try to work hard and separate that. This journal didn't want my piece. This editor didn't want my book. The director didn't want to cast me. I think those things send me spinning off in different directions, and that's good. That's really good. So I'm okay with that.
Have you found that like rejection hits a little bit different depending on what art form is being rejected?
Yes, I really do. I think that lots of times, like a literary journal is about a vibe, and they put together an issue that has to be cohesive. So if I submit something that doesn't fit into that cohesion, it makes sense that they don't take it. Doesn't mean it's not good, just means it's not right for them. And that's okay. And I can accept that a little bit better than not getting cast in a play. Because then also I start examining, well, could I have auditioned better? Should I have made bolder choices, different choices? What is it about me? Am I too young, too old, too tall? It comes down to physicality a lot too. And acting rejections, you have to know, are often about an aesthetic and how the director might see a character versus how I see it. I always wanted to play Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire. I just always wanted to play that role. Loved the movie since I was young, watched it, studied all the different actors that have played that role, and there was a theater doing it in Harrisburg, and I thought for sure that, I could play the role. And I thought I did my best at the audition. It felt really good to me, and I didn't get it. And then realized, okay, that was probably my last chance to play that role, because now I'm going to age out of it before it's ever done around here again.
Damn.
And that realization hits hard, guess that one just wasn't for me. Universe said no. But yeah, you sort of, bleed a little over that.
Do you find yourself wanting to mix theater with your reign as the second Poet Laureate?
Yes, and I think it's necessary, and I do think spoken word is kind of, theater and poetry met and had an affair and a child, and I think the child is spoken word. I do believe that some of my favorite performers I consider to be actors. The way they pace and the way they time things and their honesty and their vulnerability, all the work they're doing is acting. And I'll tell them that, and they'll be surprised, or they'll say, I always wanted to be an actor, and I never thought about that, but yeah, you're right. It's usually that, and I'm working on something right now called the Lancaster Living Poetry Museum, and I think we're probably going to be the first city around here to have this, and the opportunity is this. Anyone can do it, any age, anyone, and the goal is to choose a poet that the person feels they can relate to. They can hear, feel their work, and then they become an expert on this poet, right? They research, they learn their life story, they speak in first person as the poet, and eventually, learn some poems. If not memorize, at least be uber familiar with what they mean, analysis, be able to perform them effectively. And then I have people at the Fulton who will costume, who will do makeup, and the first Friday in April these living poets are going to be all over the city.
Wow.
And they're going to have a button. And when someone presses the button, they'll come to life. Mm-hmm. And they'll teach as this poet, answer questions as the poet, perform as the poet, just be a living museum statue, if you will. But, they'll come to life and educate. So if someone makes their way around the city, they might meet 30 different poets and experience that. And then I want to add like time period appropriate music, maybe live, maybe recorded, that depends. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully some art, maybe a portrait of the real poet, something like that. So again, I want to have your layered art forms, but I want Lancaster to sort of have all of these living poets for a night, and then maybe to bring them all to the Ware Center and have some educational experiences where students can come. Because I think it's a really fun way to learn. And my goal was to have 12 the first year, and then double it to 24 in the second year of being Poet Laureate. I already have 27 people signed up for this year.
27 people?
That want to do this.
Damn.
Some are poets, some are actors, some are just students that think it sounds fun, all different varieties of people. So, and it's definitely a situation where I'll have rehearsals and we'll talk through, whether it's more appropriate to sit or stand or be behind a desk or how they want to stage it, all those kinds of things. I'll approach it as director, and they'll approach it as actor, if you will. And so there's a lot of poets who have never acted before but feel like they'll be good at it, and I think they will too. So I'm excited to see how it all unravels. But we're having an informational meeting soon in October, and I'll have a data bank of poets that people could choose from if they don't know, because of course you want to have your classic poets that people know, but I really want to have more non-traditional, lesser-known poets, so that people can really learn and immerse. And we give homage, right, to these poets who didn't necessarily get all the credit that was coming to them, or their work is not shared widely.
I think that's a banging idea, because Lancaster's already like a walkable city.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's already like a walkable city, and to give MFE did it with the pianos, where you can actually take a tour on that, and so to have sort of like a poetry walk, to be able to get to learn and know about these people is super crazy.
Well, that's what we're planning, and then I want to match it. Like I want to have Tupac at SO Arts, and I want to have Charlotte Bronte at a tea shop. And, I want to have poets where they would naturally belong, like in their natural habitat if I can, or close to it.
Yeah.
Maybe some poets might be out on the street because that's where they like to write and like to be. Some poets might be in bars because they best wrote there. So, I really want to be intentional about where they're placed. And then the city's already committed to making a map so that, people can walk in and meet all the poets and do the whole adventure.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. We were just lost for a second there.
But we were not lost because it was part of our journey.
Because it was part of the journey.
Because sometimes being lost is part of your journey.
Okay. And
I
this
know
dumps
this.
you out on River Road. Interesting. Okay. Cool.
And it was so pretty back there.
It was so pretty.
So I'm not going to be mad at our momentary.
Not at all.
Lost.
Cool. Lancaster. It's funny. The last time I came out here, the last podcast I did, I saw Lancaster Conservancy.
Okay.
All right. Cool. I know exactly where the hell I'm at. Awesome. Cool. I was worried that I was encroaching on somebody's thing.
I think you're okay. I don't think anyone minded. And
nah, I think they're chilling.
I'm kind of lost in my whole adventure here, and it's getting big and out of control. But I kind of like it that way. I'll be able to rein it in, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like you're being ambitious with this, and I like this because, not only are you going to be able to provide like a very like artistic, artful experience for people that are coming down or that are part of the city or visiting the city. But it's also something that's smart, because you're going to be able to collaborate with different organizations. You know, the fact that they're making a whole map for you, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, it is.
That's a flex.
Everyone's been super supportive, and it was one of my projects that I presented last year when I submitted for Poet Laureate, and I just kind of grew it, and it got a little bigger, a little crazier, and everyone received it well. So
nice.
A lot of people are on board, and even people that I didn't necessarily think would respond have reached out. And the funny thing is, they have the poet. Like, it takes people 10 seconds to figure out the poet sometimes. They just know. It's in their heart. They already know. And I think, you know, watching the research happen, we're having the initial meeting in the library, because I want the Poet Laureate position to be about education and research and using resources. And not too many people head to the library to research anymore, but I want to use what's there, and I want us to meet in that place of learning, because I think the more you know about other writers, the more you learn about their stories, their responses to their stories as in their poetry. I think the richer it makes your work. You know, that's the ultimate goal. It's for people to learn and be fulfilled and meet a challenge. A lot of people say, well, I like the idea of this, but it seems like a lot. It's kind of daunting to me. But I think, you know, giving yourself those challenges is what makes you grow.
Yeah. It definitely seems like, you talking about it, to me, being somebody that organizes things as well myself, like, I'm looking at it and I'm already overwhelmed. Like, oh my God, how in the world is she going to do all of this?
I think, you know, we can utilize Zoom in a lot of cases. There's some Philly poets who want to participate. I told them that I would make sure the meetings are also, you know, Zoom options, and we can work electronically. And it's something that you can work on your own, right? It's not like a play where you need 20 people on stage at the same time. We can work in isolation a little bit. I want to come together for some rehearsals, just so that everyone can watch each other's process and share and learn and give each other suggestions. I think the community, because part of what I want to do is build community, but a lot of the work will have to happen in isolation, and that can be done in anyone's own time. So
is that so the Poet Laureate, that's 2 years or 1 year?
It's 2 years now. It changed. It started as 1 year, but they decided that, you know, some of the projects that people were proposing might require more time. And it does. It takes time to make connections, for people to learn who the Poet Laureate is. Yeah. You know, and it takes time to go into classrooms and go into places of business and you know, establish yourself. I think the first year will be a lot about connecting, and the second year will be more about, you know, really using the connections to further spread poetry. I'm also working on an anthology of different pieces that people produced during my time as Poet Laureate. I already have a few poems in the databank, you know, some that were written yesterday. I performed at Mental Health America's suicide prevention seminar, and you know, over 200 people, all with the same goal, all writing into that, and I left with some beautiful work that happened. And I'm working with Atalo and CWS right now, Church World Services, and people are writing from the perspective of immigrants and refugees. That's important to our city.
Oh, absolutely.
So I want everyone to be represented in this anthology. Whoever wants their work in the anthology and is willing to write into it, you know, I think it will be a good representation of my time as Poet Laureate.
You know, I think that's a great idea, because it's a slice of time. It's like a time capsule.
Yeah, it is.
For Lancaster. And like, you know, we do have a lot of history when it comes to our city, but at the same time, there's a lot of missing pieces, you know, of like, you know, what was the art like in, you know, 1856 in Lancaster, you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
And you're creating sort of that precedence of saying, you know, we're gonna make that happen, and we're gonna document that so that it's there.
Definitely, and hopefully people from diverse backgrounds can read and see and hear each other better, which can only improve the city.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of that has to happen. You know, a lot of paths have to cross that ordinarily wouldn't cross, and I feel like that's part of the job I've taken on too. You know, by bringing poetry into spaces where it's ordinarily not, and making people think and be honest and feel things and put them on paper. You know.
What has been the biggest challenge in terms of like, so did you have to create a 2-year plan to become Poet Laureate? And was that challenging for you, you know, when you're thinking of like, when you're thinking of your art in a 2-year span, where most people think of it as like, I don't know, what am I gonna do tomorrow?
Yeah, it is. But I've also been in education where you have to plan out ahead of things. And I think the sustainability of different programs that I want to do too, in balance with my career, my work that I do that's sustaining. You know, I'm doing a program where it's called Lunch with the Laureate, and I'll go into a place of business and do a 45-minute poetry presentation, whether that's writing, whether it's sharing about a particular poet that makes sense in that workspace, whether it's just performing and giving people the experience of hearing a spoken word artist, whatever they want it to be. But I initially thought, well, I could do that twice a month. That's easy. That's 45 minutes twice a month. But there's planning involved, and I know that. So I think things will sort of shake out where I figure out what's sustainable. Right now I have a lot of really big ideas that could, you know, evolve into a lot of time and energy, but I'm willing to spend it if people are benefiting. If I see that it's going in the right direction and it's really helping to bring poetry into workspaces, because I think, you know, part of the mission, part of what the committee decided they want is to bring poetry where it doesn't exist. And some people aren't open to coming to a poetry event. But if I come to them and I'm in their workspace and they can just sit there and eat lunch and listen and maybe experience something new, then we've done that. So, and plus I get to meet people and be out there, which inspires my work. You know, that's the other thing too. I'm a working poet and a writer. I'm working on my second book. It's mostly finished, but it has a little bit more to go. And I find that the more people I meet, the more creative things I do, you know, the more it feeds into my work.
So what is your second book about? And what is it different? How have you evolved as an artist from your first and second book? And what is the difference in content?
So my first book was called Mixtape Venus. And the idea was that we all have many sides. And I was playing Venus in a play, and I saw her becoming very goddess-like, very ethereal and, you know, not very grounded or connected or human. And I didn't like her that way. And I started to realize, like, you know what? She's a mother. She has Cupid. That's her son. And he gets in all this trouble, and she probably gets angry with him. And she's had bad love affairs, and she's been taken advantage of, and she's had daddy issues and all the stuff. You know, once I started to realize, you know, she had all these sides, it made sense that we also have all these sides. And so I had this whole big collection of poems that I wrote from all different times in my life. And I was a full-time teacher, so I didn't have a lot of undivided time. I would write a poem here, a poem there, save it, revise it, and nothing felt connected. But when I put this umbrella over it, then it felt connected, because it was me at all different phases in my life, you know, responding to different things that happened to me over time. And the fact that, yeah, I can still consider myself a goddess even on my darker days, even on my lesser days. And also music is a huge influence for me. And what I noticed was every single one of the poems, even though they didn't seem connected, they all had some musical something. Whether it was a reference to a musician, a song, an artist, I write into music, I write with music. And so the mixtape Venus grew out of that. But it's, highly autobiographical book. My next book, my new book, is called Light Banter. And it's sort of a play on that common phrase, but it's all the different ways to consider light. Where do we get light? What is light at night versus light in the day? What is sun versus moon versus stars versus spotlights on a stage versus streetlights? Searchlights. And does the light come from inside us? What gives us that light? How do we keep it on? All those questions, the banter becomes figuring all that out, right? And so my concept was I wanted the cover to reflect a moment when the sun and the moon were having some sort of romantic dinner in the sky, which could never really happen. But what if it did? What would they say to each other? And I wanted the ocean under them, and I wanted sea life, and I wanted stars. I wanted, stars looking down on it and fish looking up on it. And I wanted it to just be this moment when everything stops. And
that's a beautiful visual.
Yeah. And so Keisha Finney, Lancaster artist, she and I connected, and I ran the concept past her, and she said, I think I can see that. And so she read a lot of my poems, and we talked about it and collabed on it, and the cover is stunning. I'm so thrilled with it. And the book is divided into 3 parts, and the parts are searchlights, spotlights, and streetlights. So it's looking inside, looking outside, and looking at the community. And the poems are sort of divided that way, but a lot of the poems are dedicated to other poets. A lot of the poems are about sort of my inspirations, like what has lit me up as a writer, as a person. And yeah, it's coming together pretty nicely. I wrote a poem in the beginning because I wanted people to sort of understand how to read the book. So there's a poem that actually took on a play form, and it's a dialogue between the sun and the moon. And then there's a third character, a woman who kind of comes in and interprets sort of where her life is going based on the sun and the moon and how they feel about each other. So that's the first thing in the book before anything. And
it's like I think the prologue.
It'll kind of inform how to read the book. So yeah, I have an amazing publisher, local poet, Lee Hinton. He has many books of his own that I admire. He's been my mentor, he's been my friend, and he'll publish this book as well. I'm part of the Irish G Press family, and the poets that are also in the family are my friends. They'll all probably weigh in as soon as the manuscript's ready. I have someone who's going to edit the book, a poet friend who's a little removed, but who writes a lot about astrology, and she writes into celestial things. So she's going to look at the poem from, all the poems from that standpoint. But I would say it's probably about a month or 2 or 3 from being out into the world. I want to take my time with it, but I'm excited.
Damn. That's great. So you're gonna have the Living Poetry Museum. You're gonna have a book out.
Yep.
By the time your tenure is done, what do you hope your legacy will be as the Poet Laureate when you're finished?
I think, first of all, I want people to know me not just as a writer, but as a person. As a person who cares about other people and who writes to connect. And I want people to recognize me and understand that, I want to know their story. I don't want to just tell mine. I don't want to just perform for snaps and claps. I really, truly want people to understand that writing is art that heals, art that nourishes, and that there's so many people that have talent that's been undiscovered, unexplored. And so I want to reach those people. That's most important to me. I also want to leave sort of my physical footprint. I want this anthology. I want people to accept that poetry's fun, that it's interesting. It's not a bunch of old white men in an anthology of writing about things that don't matter at all in the world anymore. There's so much more to it than that. And just when I think everyone is on that page, I'll meet somebody new who's highly intellectual, doing amazing things, but they'll say something like, I never really read a poem that moved me. I want to fix that. I want to fix that. I want everyone to be able to sort of put their finger on or experience something that got to them. It made them think or feel, or ideally both.
What are your social medias? How can people find you? How can people follow your journey as the Poet Laureate and just keep updated on your career?
Sure. I'm probably most active on Instagram, and it's just Dana.Kinsey. And eventually I'll be creating soon, within the next few weeks, a Poet Laureate Instagram page, and I'll have a follow notification on my page, but I'll try to post information that's relevant on both. I'm also on Facebook, just under my name, and I don't really tweet very often, but I might try to add that in. And eventually I'd like to have a website too, to publish other people's work, to just have a presence on there, so that people could also listen, watch videos, all different formats.
Very cool.
Yeah.
This is Ángel Rafael. This has been Pretentious. Follow Dana, follow her career. Come to Lancaster. Listen to some poetry. April, right? It's April? Yeah.
First Friday in April. That's the time. That's the place.
Peace out, y'all.
Thank you.